yeah, a lot of classical musicians I encounter, like around my age, I think it doesn't resonate with them. I've been thinking about that and how to kind of bridge that gap, but I'm not quite sure. Because I think that playing it for like my mother or people who aren't in the discipline, they tend to be more reciprocal or more like interested in it than some of my peers.
There's a lot of emotion and history and all sorts of other things shoved in there that makes Bach, a man, not the guy in the wig. And that's something that a lot of people, I think, don't really understand or kind of overlook.
When you start with it, you're immediately presented with a lot of, I don't want to say rules, but practices. I think that's kind of off-putting to a lot of musicians.
It's kind of like when you go to a museum where on the surface it's all these fancy things and they're polished up and it shows kind of the peak of this culture or whatever, or this section of time. But really the message that, at least that I've come to learn pretty quickly, is that people are the same and have been for tens of thousands of years. And that the emotions that we feel, the emotions that we express are same across history. And that's something I really feel with his music.
I mean, I've played Bach in like hospitals or in community settings like that, like for community concerts, and it always seems to be the most well received. So yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think I'm not sure, but I think there's something so simple about it. A lot of the Bach suites, also Bach cello suites. I mean, of course, very complex music, and there's so much that can be done with it. But I think it's something simple and something that speaks universally to people.
I think taking a look back and taking a look at different people over the years is absolutely crucial to who we are, especially right now. And Bach obviously has had not only the music of his day, but how his music has transcended time, and that the kind of different paths it's taken, that's really important to learn about, I think.
Hi, I'm Nick Pond, and this is Bach 52. Albert Imperato has been promoting classical music for over 3 decades, and he is a founder of 21C Media Group. And full disclosure, he's also my publicist. I had the pleasure of flipping the tables on Albert for this episode and getting to hear him talk about his life in classical music and his work. And it was a fascinating conversation. Something I really treasure about Albert is his boundless enthusiasm for classical music. So it was really exciting to hear his thoughts on Bach specifically and how that spreads out into just about everything in classical music. Albert came to classical music after hearing the Vienna Philharmonic perform when he was in college. The minute he got back to Stanford, where he was a student, he started hosting listening parties for classical music that hosted 20, 30, 40 people in his dorm room, all to spread the word for this thing that he had discovered after going to this concert. That concert flipped a switch inside of him and opened the gates to a boundless curiosity and passion for classical music that has led to a really rich career promoting the art form. Beyond his boundless enthusiasm for classical music, something that makes Albert really special is that he's so generous with his enthusiasm for it. He doesn't have any time for elitist trappings around classical music. And in fact, he believes it's for everyone. And he will take it to absolutely anyone because he knows that it can be relevant to them. And he knows that it will have an impact on a life. It's like he's never forgotten what it was like for him to fall in love with it for the first time. And he's eager to share that experience with just about anybody he encounters. Just to start off kind of basically, let's start off with your journey in music, like how you got into the music industry and like what led you here and what part Bach played in that journey, if at all.
Good question. Yeah, I was not trained at all in music. I never took music lessons. But we had a piano in the house. My brother loved to sing, and I would just listen with my ear, learn how to play Elton John and Broadway shows and Billy Joel, and I would basically play the piano for my brother and entertain the family. You know, Italian families, they always have a grandma around who wants you to put on a show for them. And that's literally how I taught myself to play the piano. I think one day I sort of heard the Bach minuet, the very simple minuet.
Right.
And I think I was like, oh, this is how you play it. Oh, it's just G. And I just figured out, I had never read music, but I figured out how to noodle through it. And I thought, oh, that's cool. Why is that pretty? Blah, blah, blah. Fast forward many years later, I went to college. I went to Stanford, where I studied history, American Studies it was called. And they sent me to Vienna my sophomore year just to take a break in my studies and try new things. And that was where I walked into a concert, heard the Vienna Philharmonic playing Beethoven, discovered, the classic St. Paul moment, Road to Damascus moment of, oh my God, this music is amazing. Hearing a Beethoven symphony. Almost immediately I heard Leonard Bernstein conducting Beethoven in Vienna was some of my earliest experiences. So I came back a changed man to Stanford and became the guy on the campus who was always playing symphonies really loud in his room. And we had parties. I would have 20, 30, 40 people in a dorm lounge listening to a Beethoven symphony or a Mahler symphony. It was a kind of a famous thing to come to these listening parties. And so music got sort of filed into my soul at that time in college. Years later, I never thought you could be in the music biz, having not been trained as a musician. So I never thought, oh, maybe I'll be in music when I get out of college. So I went into journalism, and in 1986, I by then developed quite a little collection of recordings, and I went and heard Leonard Bernstein conduct Mahler's Second Symphony, and I completely lost my mind. It was the single best concert I've ever heard. It was the single most powerful artistic experience of my life, hearing him do Mahler 2. Of course, it's how Bradley Cooper is like living my dream right now. So anyway, I sent my resume to Deutsche Grammophon, and they, 6 months later, got me a basic entry-level job putting up posters and count records in stores. So that started my career. I worked at Deutsche Grammophon, which had this archive label, the original instruments label. And there I started listening to a lot of quintessential Bach music, Brandenburg concertos, or John Early Gardner doing the B minor Mass and the Matthew Passion. So it became a larger part of my life, my professional life. But my actual very first Bach moment really came when I started getting into the music in college. And I went to a record store having just the memory of what I had heard so far and just wanted to buy some new stuff. And it was my first set of things that I bought. And one of the very first 5 recordings I bought was a Bach recording. It was Academy of St. Martin in the Fields playing Bach oboe concertos. It had a pretty package. I was like, Bach, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven. I was Mozart. I was trying to have a little spread of things. That was the Bach thing that I pulled out. I have to say, I obsessively listened to, first of all, it was the first time I really heard the oboe and obsessed about what an incredible instrument is. I think Bach wrote for it particularly beautifully. But I loved the energy of that album. The slow movements are just so ravishing. They're sometimes sensual. They're sometimes just elegiac. Sometimes they're just tender and intimate. And I just thought, wow, he's using a very small little ensemble and a soloist and creating so many different feelings. And so that was when I began to clue into the specialness of Bach. And professionally, I was very lucky because over the years, I simply got to work with one after the other great artists, some of whom were really known for their Bach. So I've experienced Bach as a complete and total novice with no knowledge, and now working for years with really great artists, including yourself. I mean, my first Matthew Passion was you at Carnegie Hall doing The Evangelist, which is like watching Michael Jordan play basketball. It's like you're watching the person do the thing they were born to do. That's how I really felt. Just the way you walked out there, and the way you made everybody tune into that story. You know, I know there's been other treatments of the piece that play up on the theatrical element due to Peter Sellers' approach. But just hearing that in the concert all that time, it's like, wow, that's the other side of Bach. That's Bach taking us to a world that is kind of really distant from ours in so many ways. You just feel there was a society he was bringing in for that experience that's radically different than our own. I'll just confess it. When people say, who are my favorite composers? He doesn't come in my top 3. He doesn't come in my top 5. Now, I know most academics say Bach's number 1, but from my own life experience, Bach is hovering in the top 10, hovering the top 20. But, you know, for me and who I am, it's, you know, Beethoven, it's Debussy, it's Mahler in my top 3. And of course, who knows? I mean, all of them owed a debt to Bach. Everyone who came after Bach owed some sort of debt to Bach. Yeah, so Bach's been there, but it's just not been the thing that it is to other people.
Right. He's sort of like the thing that buttresses all the rest of your passions, though.
Yes, and you know, you asked me about relevance of Bach. That was something that you said this series is about. And honestly, since the day you asked me that, I've been thinking about it. And the reason is because as a music promoter, I'm promoting classical music in America, which there's a little bit of a disconnect. When I tell most people who are not classical music lovers, they ask me what I do, and I tell them, they're like, you can make a living doing that? Like, there's so little sense of classical music playing this large presence in the life of people in America. And then, of course, I have to tell them, well, that's not true. There's plenty of people who care deeply about it. There's a lot more people in church singing some Bach on the weekends, and we realize there's more people crying to, you know, Joy of Man's Desiring. When they hear it, they don't realize sometimes that they're even hearing Bach. They're not here, maybe noticing that they're hearing it in a movie. But my whole career, I've had to sort of fight for the idea of the relevance of classical music. And I think on the way over, I came up with this idea, finally distilling this all, that relevance is kind of what we make of it. I think there's this idea that relevance is some universal value. And I don't think it is at all. I think relevance is what we believe in, what speaks to us, what we think should matter to others, what should matter in the carrying on of our daily lives and what we share with others. And I think relevance is a moving target. And we find ways to make things more or less relevant. And depending on how good we are at our jobs, we maybe make Bach more relevant today than people even might expect it to be. And, you know, I was thinking also on a broader scale, at a time where like the number one message in the air is everything's falling apart. American society, politics, you name it, what's not falling apart?
Right.
There's war in the Middle East, there's war in the Ukraine, brother against brother. There's really not a lot of obvious hope. Bach, to me, the relevance of Bach is reminding us of the human capacity for order, that in his music was a kind of order that, to me, is there as evidence. It's evidence speaking across time while we continue to perform this music in various guises. It's speaking across time to the human capacity for order. And once again, I think we choose whether we embrace that and encourage it and encourage that idea of bringing things together, or we fuel its opposite. It's as relevant as we want it to be, and I think for that reason I just mentioned, I think Bach is kind of more relevant than ever, reminding us of what we need to be reminded of right now.
Right. I mean, it makes sense that you say that, because I mean, the music was created in a really chaotic time. There was a lot of war in the region during his childhood and lifetime, and you know, he was creating order out of chaos in a way. I mean, I think that's why it's kind of compelling. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody else, I think it was Jeremy Dank. He was saying that another reason people find it relevant these days, or like he thinks young people are drawn to it, or he notices that young people are drawn to it, is that it's also sort of like very like digital in the way and sort of formulaic and mathematical in the way that it's constructed. It's almost like algorithmic. And so like in this time of algorithm, and kind of advanced math and technology, like it seems to resonate too. There's a lot of reasons why we continue to make it relevant, or seems to be something that resonates with today. So you're a classical music promoter in the United States, which you say can be, it seems kind of strange to a lot of people and sort of like a surprise that you can do that. I mean,
I'm not promoting basketball.
Yeah.
I'm not promoting football. Right. It's not a mainstream American pastime every week. It might be hidden in the cracks, but it's not obviously that.
Yeah,
here.
Certainly not like it used to be like in the time of Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah, and even then, you could go back and do the studying. Just, he was on the radio, and his debut at Carnegie Hall was on the radio and became a national sensation and in the news. But you could also go down and just say how prevalent was it in our culture. You could write plenty of books about the subject.
Right. So why do you think it's important, though? I mean, you've made this really bold choice, the way you describe it. Well, I mean, why is it important to promote classical music in a place like the United States?
Well, I mean, first of all, we inherited a lot of our cultural heritage from Europe. We brought Europe with us,
right?
Whether we like it or not. That's we impose European, Western ideas on the world. So we certainly impose some bad ideas. Why not impose some beautiful art? So I say, go for it. I think all of us are enriched by the context that we live in. And we're enriched by the things we are and the things that make us who we are. And also by all the things that we don't know and that we need to know and that we need to find out. And I think there's something kind of wonderful and crazy and fabulous that a guy born in Germany in 16, what year was it, 85?
Yeah, something like that.
Born in Germany, writing music for the church, like jamming on his Lutheran faith, that is speaking to us today across the centuries in this totally different culture that we live in. But yet, also, how different is it? Bach was a father. He lost loved ones. He lost a wife, and he lost children who died. He experienced terrible sadness and loss and tragedy. You pointed out he lived at a time of terrible upheaval. So much as his world was utterly different, his world was very, very much like ours in its fundamental outline. It's so funny. We don't feel funny quoting a Greek philosopher without thinking we need to wear a toga. And yet somehow when we approach Bach, we feel somehow like we're supposed to be in a different kind of awe, and that it's somehow some divine thing that we have to wrestle with somehow. And what actually made you start thinking about the relevance thing? Is it about some of the politics in the air and the talk that we're doing now about inclusion and everything else? Did that get you going on the idea we should talk about Bach's relevance?
I actually have been having this question float around in my mind for a little bit longer than that. I mean, I feel like this conversation has sort of entered the mainstream about inclusion and sort of equity issues around Western classical composers a little bit more recently. But I actually have been thinking about this since I think 2017 or 2016, so for a long time now.
Oh, wow.
I was singing cantatas in Weimar, which is where Bach used to work before he moved to Leipzig. And it was this Bach Academy that was being led by Helmut Rilling. There were people, young musicians, instrumentalists, and singers coming to study with Helmut and study Bach's music through these cantatas. And we would tour around going to the various churches Bach worked at, stopping finally in Leipzig and doing the final concert in either the Thomas Church in Leipzig or the church where he was baptized in Eisenach, where you would be singing right next to like the font where he was, baptized.
I've still not been to Leipzig. I feel criminally negligent for that.
I think you'd love it. So it's an amazing city.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
So it's like Bach Epcot Center. But one of that summer in particular, they were doing a documentary about Helmut Rilling. And they were interviewing all of us, kind of asking how this work has impacted our lives. And the journalist asked me in the interview, so do you think the music of Bach is for everyone? And I was like, oh, yes, of course. And the minute that came out of my mouth, I thought, that is a really unexamined answer. And it's interesting, the thing that really popped into my head was, as I said it, I could picture the album covers of John Eliot Gardner's Bach pilgrimage or whatever that he was doing, where he was
with the National Geographic photos.
Yes. And
we were working together in the year 2000 when they were touring that whole project.
And I mean, the project's amazing. But I thought of those images and I thought, is it really for everybody? And I ended up coming back to the answer. I continually come back to the answer, yes, as a base answer, because I just think about the way the music has changed my life and saved my life in many times. And, it's music that I'm extraordinarily passionate about. I find really important meaning in even works that are deeply religious and seem very much dogmatic and in a box like the Passions. I think there are messages in there that really should and could resonate with everybody. The John Passion, for instance, it's really all about cancel culture, I mean, you have and it's about mob mentality. And there are totally valid conversations about, is the piece anti-Semitic? Yes, most likely. Certainly the source material is anti-Semitic. I mean, one of the agendas that John, whoever John was, writing the gospel, was to differentiate Christians from Jews. So there is inherently some sort of anti-Semitism in there. But looking at Bach's treatment of that story, I'm not convinced musically that that's really what's on his mind. I think really what he sees in that story is a mob that is so consumed by their passion and anger and just their inability to think for themselves and think critically and to have compassion. And so they end up crucifying their own savior, who's one of them. They end up scapegoating somebody. We do that all the time in society. I mean, I think that, you look at the era of McCarthyism. I mean, these are stories that continually come back. And I think they're things that we can think about. I mean, we're talking about cancel culture now in today's cultural zeitgeist. And
I mean, now more than ever, I mean, really, you've just laid out the argument further of the relevance of the music now more than ever.
Yeah. So, I mean,
because I have to admit, when I heard a really gorgeous performance of the Matthew Passion last spring with Orchestra St. Luke's. And it was a very powerful, really powerful performance. And depending on the news cycle and what you saw in the news that morning, that crowd getting riled up and bloodthirsty is so I saw those people on the news earlier and now they're up to no good again. So yeah, that's not going anywhere. And that question, how do we retain our compassion? And once again, I think this is another value of listening to music, is that it asks us, first of all, it asks us to slow down and pay attention to someone else's work. Really, in a way, there's nothing greater that we do as human beings than give our attention to others, whether it's just a person that you talk to or listening to that music. Think about it. Like when you sit and listen to the Matthew Passion, how many minutes of music?
It's 3.5 hours.
Yeah, you give 3.5 hours. You are giving a gift just as much as he's giving you a gift. You're giving him a gift of 3.5 hours of your soul, your experience, and having that impact your life. So it's a two-way street. And not to get too dramatic about it, I have to say, politics and religion are getting really not doing very well in managing our current human crises. And I think, honestly, over and over again, art is the last hope. I think it's the only thing that still hasn't divided. You don't meet that many people oh, I'm against art, no art. I mean, that's a pretty far out there. Maybe they're against certain types of art,
right?
But they're not against art as a thing. And I'm just thinking that's what's going to get us through the next round of storms and earthquakes and everything else that we're going to, no doubt, experience.
Yeah.
Especially in that, think about it, in Bach's time, people wandering off into the forest, getting rather lost without their Maps app, in divining, the power of nature on their own. They had no choice. We're going to live in a world where nature is the thing that we have to preserve. Think about that role reversal.
Right.
To go from the thing that used to hold the eternal mystery to the thing that we're determining whether it's going to continue to function properly. That does change the order of the universe, and I think that's another reason to listen to Bach, to hear the world when it was oriented different.
Yeah.
When it had a different structure, it had a different focus. Actually, one of my jobs at Universal, at Deutsche Grammophon, when I was running the label here in America, I always was asked, how do you translate this very serious German record label to the American market? So we'd come up with all kinds of compilations. And one of them, if you don't mind, a prop.
No, we love props.
One of the compilations we came up with was Mad About the Classics. And we put out a whole series of Mad About the Classics in I think the late 90s. And we hired Roz Chast, the New Yorker cartoonist, and we did a series of Mad About the Classics releases. And my job was to write notes for the Mad About series. And I found this in my old drawer of work stuff that I did.
That's amazing.
And I had to write about Bach in 3 paragraphs. I had to write, yeah. Should I read it?
Yes.
Okay. Bach's status today as one of the towering figures in music history seems somehow out of sync with his reputation during his lifetime as a humble, extremely practical organist/composer. He wrote almost all of his works for specific commissions or for teaching purposes and expected to be paid for his efforts. But despite his astute business sense, the noble tone and impeccable craftsmanship of his compositions convey his strong Lutheran faith and deep, almost mystical belief in the power of music. Bach wrote well over 1,000 works for just about every musical form, including solo instruments such as organ, violin, cello, harpsichord, various concertos and grand masses and oratorios for solo voices, chorus, etc. In each of the areas of composition, Bach raised music to a higher level of technical perfection. The composer Richard Wagner once said, "What a world the unfathomably great Johann Sebastian constructed." So that is what this compilation was all about. And the other, trying to take a page from popular culture, I did the 5 did you know facts about every composer that we focused on. And you want to put on things people can relate to, like this crazy young 20-year-old walking 200 miles to hear another organist, to hear Buxtehude play the organ. Like, really think if you told your friends you're going to walk 200 miles to hear a musician do something, you're going to be possibly committed. But the last one was really the one that really spoke to me. The American composer and writer Virgil Thomson wrote that Bach's concert music, if played in the style of Bach's time, sounded remarkably like 20th century American swing. Quote, "The exactitude with which a minimum time unit is kept, the omnipresence of the harpsichord's ping like a brush on a cymbal, all make it a matter of preference, whether one puts it that Bach has gone to town or that some of the more scholarly jitterbugs of the town have wandered into a church." Which I love that one. And I think the breakthrough for me when I was researching the series, when I read that quote, was that as much as Bach is monumental, as much as he's beyond our comprehension in certain ways as individuals, he's also someone writing for real people. They're getting this music, and you could just picture the luxuries, little luxuries they were taking, trying to bring that spirit of that music to life. And just reading that quote, suddenly you're like, even his most abstract pieces, like you think of some of his Bach, his solo suites for cello, and you're realizing the inspiration is dance. The form is from dance.
Yeah.
How it's not just intellectual and it's not just spiritual. It's also visceral. It's also physical. It's also based on something everyone does. Everyone's got a little dance in them. So anyway, doing this project, which was about promoting, music to the masses, also, taught me things that humanized Bach for me. And I think that's kind of stuck with me ever since. Even with thinking, who knows more about Bach? The person who never studied it, who cries when they hear that melody? Or is it the expert who's so jaded that they don't actually cry anymore? Who really knows more about Bach at that point?
Right.
Anyway, one more quote in the Did You Knows here. These are still available, by the way. Bach is the German word for brook or stream. Beethoven once wrote to a friend, his name ought not to be Bach, but ocean, because of his infinite harmonies and inexhaustible wealth of combinations. So anyway, that's my little plug for my old series.
I love it.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever asked you, do you actually remember what the very, very first piece of Bach that entered your brain?
I mean, I think I certainly played like some of those minuets and whatnot when I was as a solo like a violinist and a violin student in the early Suzuki books. But the first thing that really resonated was the Bach double concerto, because when you're a Suzuki student, you hit that in book 4. You hit the second violin part in book 4, and you play the first violin part in book 5. And I remember hearing it for the first time in a group class, and I thought, that is a cool piece. I want to play that. And it was really like the first musical goal that because before that I was just like doing violin lessons because my parents made me. But that was one of the turning points where I started to have a real passion for music. So yeah, the double concerto is like the thing that really was the first thing to turn my crank.
I would love to hear that music in a club atmosphere. Maybe not, we don't want to make too many clinking sounds with the cocktails, but I wouldn't mind a drink. And I would love to be able to clap after some of the solos. Maybe they're not like clappable, they're not that long, and they're not that virtuosic, really. There's something very swinging. I think Virgil Thomson's use of the word swing was very apropos. But I can never hear jazz the same way now. I hear so much more of Bach when I hear jazz. And I'm sure, obviously there were jazz musicians who famously advocated Bach and played Bach and thought a lot about Bach. And I just love that connection. Nothing brings you more up to date with the relevance of Bach as an American than to understand the connection with jazz and the way that they're similar and the way that they've, the way the former influenced the latter.
Yeah, there's so many options when you're playing it because the bass lines and the harmonies that go above them and the harpsichord and everything, it's meant to be improvised. And he was a master improviser. It's interesting, a lot of people in these interviews have been talking about how he was such a great improviser. It's one of the first things they mention. And, we think of him, I think like in the larger cultural zeitgeist, he's been put on this pedestal, and we think of him as like this very serious erudite person who created this tome of unalterable things, when actually everything he was creating was kind of just a starting place for your own creativity.
My most recent Bach experience with a great artist is Alisa Weilerstein.
Right.
She recorded all of the Bach cello suites, and she recorded them before the pandemic, and then the album came out during the pandemic, and she couldn't perform this music live. This was like a dream to make this project. Suddenly it's out and she can't perform it for people live. And so she started just setting up from her Instagram account, we called it 36 Days of Bach. And she played a movement of a suite for 36 days. And, I really felt just what an earthquake it was in her life that this artist couldn't perform. Mm-hmm. She said she was really having troubles practicing. She was just really in pain, frankly, from not being able to share this music. And that took me down into the music with her. That was the first time that I was really living and working with my own relationship with that music. And now she's doing this project called Fragments, where the Bach movements are part of this theatrical evening where there's works by contemporary composers. There's no notes. You just go in and you're hearing music it's an hour long, and it's got lighting and sets. And, that music, Bach's music, holds its own perfectly fine. Even out of order, those movements on their own are incredibly resonant. And when you're in that hall hearing all this music that you've never heard before, all the world premieres, you get to those islands of Bach. It's like you're swimming out there and you find the island to rest on and take your breath. Once again, it's an example of how every generation of artists finds their way to make the music relevant and bring it to life in the way they believe is important. We think when I was a kid, I think there was Bach electrified, probably some Bach and some disco.
Yeah, like Nina Simone quoting Bach.
Yeah, there you go. Been a while.
Yeah, but it still resonates.
Well, we should have heard a lot more Nina Simone playing Bach.
Indeed.
And talking about it. Oh my God, we need to hear more of Nina Simone talking about everything.
Well, that's true. She's shockingly prescient.
I did begin my morning listening to the entire B minor Mass. My brother sang in a choir back in the day. He was in the St. Patrick's choir on Fifth Avenue. Uh-huh. And I just remember, him coming home singing the Gloria from the B minor Mass, and I would get that in my head. You know, years later to actually then hear the whole work, and when the Gloria came, I mean, to this day, nothing brings my brother, you know, who's gone, departed from this world, unfortunately, but brings him back to me than thinking of those pieces of music that just, it lit him up, it lit up the memory of our time together, especially you know, we're talking right before Christmas. You know, when those Advent cantatas hit, you know, Wach it auf and all that stuff. Yeah. That's another thing I do love about Bach, the seasonality of it. I mean, he wrote for every week, right?
Yes.
Every Sunday, 3 times, 3 complete cycles of Sundays. I mean, let's all relate to that. The idea of remaining kind of turned on and focused on our passion for 3 straight years every weekend. You know, we lose our attention in a half hour. I mean, that time frame is a lot longer. Then again, he wasn't sitting around with his clicker looking at cable TV or you know, cruising the internet. Yeah, I want to learn more, if anything, learn more about Bach. I think I'm coming late in my life to the Passions. True confession, I've never really listened to the John Passion, which everyone who knows it says is their favorite of the Passions. So I've got a ways to go. Early in my career, there were a couple of snobby people around who didn't exactly help me in my pursuit of this knowledge about the music. There was a certain snobbiness about it. Sort of like, hey, look, you know, I'm real busy. I can't really explain this to you. Or even, you know, I'm going to keep you at arm's length. I don't think you should talk to that conductor yet or talk to that. Oh, yeah, I got a little snootiness in the beginning. And that was something I was very aware of in my work, especially now owning my own company. No employee is ever going to feel like I'm looking down at them because they don't know something about music. That's an absolute, that cannot happen. And I will never make a person feel self-conscious that they don't know something. Right. What do I know about water polo? Like, I mean, what right do I have to think that like me not knowing about something isn't, like, teach me, make me learn. Right. You know, there's plenty of things I don't know about. I just would love to abandon that tone.
The thing that inspires me the most about you is just how you have such an amazing enthusiasm for this music. And you will take it to anybody. And I mean, your stories about your dorm parties in Stanford, that seems like so quintessential.
People have reached out to me 30 years later and say, I heard a symphony the first time in that room at Stanford, and now I give a lot of money to the LA Phil. I just wanted you to know that was because of that concert you took me to, or that was because you know, whatever. It's amazing to me how many people, it is. It's a very fun thing to introduce someone to something. It's the funnest thing in the world. Like, it's so cool. I mean, maybe if I had been a teacher, I would have had the chance to turn people on in a group. I think because I'm not a teacher, I've used whatever I've been given to spread the word on things that I love. And I was very fortunate that that job, working for a record company, changed my life. I would have not known. I mean, I can't even believe who I've met and worked with in my lifetime and how their voices and their takes on music are in my head. I can't even, before the phones, I don't even have pictures of these people that I met and talked about music with.
I mean, so you have your side hobby, right, of the fashion blog. And it's hugely popular.
Which I don't feel self-conscious about with you.
Well, you shouldn't feel self-conscious about it at all. Everybody has hobbies. Also, I mean, what you've done with it is amazing. You have an amazing following. And something that I really love seeing on it is the way you're like introducing people you would never think would be interested in classical music into it. Like you bring some of these people to concerts that, you know, you've met through this whole experiment, and certainly a lot of your followers are like going to check stuff out from time to time.
We had a row of guys in denim at a performance of Rafael Payari in the San Diego Symphony. I got a block of tickets. I asked the orchestra, can you please give me a block of tickets? Because whenever someone says, I've never been to Carnegie Hall, I say, I will get you your first ticket there. I will find a way to get you a ticket into Carnegie Hall. Either I'll buy you a hard-to-get ticket, or I'll get you a comp. And San Diego gave me 10 comps. And that was one of my happiest days, was watching my row of my friends who had never been to Carnegie Hall there together. One of them like writing to me afterwards, like, oh my God, I got to go back there. Oh, that was incredible. Is it okay if I post a picture? And I'm like, wow, check it out. It's just an amazing thing to share with people. I also make the comparison. It's like a really great, very rich and satisfying meal, a very nutritious sounds. Pop music is fantastic. I love pop music.
Of course.
But every once in a while, when I listen to pop music that used to make me crazy with enthusiasm, I'm like, not as enthusiastic today about it. And I want to be.
Right.
I want to put on the Killers and think Mr. Brightside is just as good today as I thought when I first heard it on the radio. But it doesn't have quite the same staying power sometimes in me. Years later, sometimes you rediscover it, and that's a whole different thing. But I love that my first symphony I really fell in love with is Beethoven 7, and I still listen to that thing, and I still can't help but get up and air conduct.
Well, I think it's amazing because it seems to, like, just watching it from afar, it looks like you're getting to provide that transformational experience that you had for other people.
That's exactly right. Every day I wake up, I make my coffee, and then I choose my first listen of the day. And it's almost always a Haydn quartet is often my first piece of morning music. It's or a Bach, often a keyboard work. I think my worst dread in life is waking up and not feeling enthusiastic about the things that I love. Music, people, taking a jog. I mean, the things that I love, a plate of ravioli, a bubble bath, a gin martini. I mean, we could write a Gershwin song. That's my dread, is wake up one day and not be excited about the things that I'm excited about and wanting to share them. Because that's really what we're here on this earth to do, is to share. Even if we share nothing besides each other's company, we've shared something fantastic. But that's what I love about our friendship. You and I could be goofballs and go out on the street and take hammy Instagram photos and not be ashamed.
Yes.
And then we can talk really seriously about music, even talk very seriously about life when one of us is faced with issues. A family member who's going through something, a loss, a setback. Yeah, so I love that kind of idea that every single thing in our life is fueling our sense of this life having been eventful, of it meaning something. And that's where I go back to the relevance thing again. I just had to learn a little bit with my career that even if I can't pick up the phone and get my artist on the Today Show, that doesn't mean that the music's not important. Popularity is just a thing. It's another adjective we use. Mozart's very popular. It's not the most obvious kind of popularity. Unfortunately, we equate popularity with it's on television. It's in our face in a visual format. But there's a lot of people streaming classical music these days. Huge. The numbers are huge. It's kind of saving classical a little bit on the streaming apps. Classical music is a very popular genre. I mean, relative to what it was maybe just when they were selling records in stores. Right. So I don't know what makes a person enthusiastic. I don't even know what it is. Maybe because I'm not a musician. That's my skill, is being enthusiastic. That's the way I can share music, is my enthusiasm for it.
The aria for this episode is taken from Cantata 167. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe. You people, praise God's love. This aria is all about spreading the word. Ihr Menschen means you people, means everybody. It means humanity. Spread the word about God's love to humanity. And thinking about what Albert was saying about how his life's work has been devoted to spreading the word about how wonderful and impactful and transformative and amazing classical music is, it made me think that this would be a great pairing with this interview. This aria is a direct invitation to all of humanity. It doesn't say, you faithful. It says, you people, Ihr Menschen, humanity. And it's an invitation to celebrate love, divine love, God's love, love that encompasses everything. You'll hear Bach paint this in the long melismas that I have to sing a couple of times in this that seem to encompass absolutely every single note of the scale. This aria brims with boundless enthusiasm, just like Albert. And when I was listening to Albert talk about how he loved being able to get people their first ticket to Carnegie Hall and the ways in which he brings classical music to absolutely everybody, it made me think this would be a good pairing. Albert's work is not unlike the work that this aria extols us to perform. When you listen to this aria, you'll hear that there's a generosity to this music. It's warm, it's inviting. It's music that says, this is for you. It's for all of you. It reminds me a lot of Albert's boundless enthusiasm and his excitement to share classical music with just about anybody who crosses his path.
Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe und preiset seiner Gütigkeit. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe und preiset seiner Gütigkeit. Und preiset seiner Gültigkeit. Lobt ihn aus reinem Herzenstriebe. Lobt ihn aus reinem Herzenstriebe, aus reinem Herzenstriebe, dass uns zu bestimmter Zeit, das Horn den Weg zum Leben, das Horn des Heils, den Weg zum Leben an Jesu, seinem Sohn, ergeben. Lobt ihn aus reinem Herzenstriebe, dass uns zu bestimmter Zeit das Horn des Heils, den Weg zum Leben an Jesu, seinem Sohn, ergeben. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe und preiset seiner Gültigkeit. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe und preiset seiner Gültigkeit. Ihr Menschen, rühmet Gottes Liebe und preiset seiner Gültigkeit.